So today we saw Tesla stock close up about 1.25% higher than yesterday. Now we also had a good reading from the consumer sentiment report, which is basically a report that measures the overall attitude of consumers towards the economy. It's basically just a survey that's done by the University of Michigan that asks questions towards individuals, random individuals throughout the country, kind of trying to get their gauge on where the current state of the economy is. And today we saw that it actually came in a little bit higher than what was expected. But we also got this update from Carvana that mentioned that the Model 3 is the most popular used EV on Carvana because of its low prices. Now, one of the things I like doing when it comes to trading or investing in a company is by looking into alternative data. So I went ahead and hopped on Google Trends specifically, and I typed in Model 3s compared to other EV vehicles to see the search volume, and it's very surprising because we see that the Tesla Model 3 outperforms the Ford Mustang Mach-E and the Chevrolet Bolt in terms of search volume by a significant amount. Now, of course, this is due to the pricing power that Tesla has. See, in previous videos, I showed that there has been extensive amounts of research conducted that shows that a lot of consumers, or just a lot of Americans that are looking to buy a new vehicle, are interested in buying a new EV, and we continuously see the trend for EVs going up, but the two main concerns is price and range. And so because Tesla has the ability to lower prices while still remaining profitable, well, it only makes sense that Tesla's search volume by individuals looking to buy an EV is going to be much greater than the competition. Now, one of the catalyst events I mentioned in yesterday's video that we absolutely wanted to pay attention to for today was going to be the bank earnings, and particularly for Wells Fargo and JP Morgan. And the reason I said this is because the bank's earnings always kind of show us an indication of how the overall economy is doing. Now, both Wells Fargo and JP Morgan beat their earnings, but when you go ahead and parse through the earnings report for Wells Fargo, we see something notable. We see that net loan charge-offs increased from the first quarter, along with the fact that consumer charge-offs continue to deteriorate modestly. Now, in yesterday's video, I mentioned that, this was an important metric to pay attention to, because even if banks beat their earnings, well, that's good. But we also want to see, how charge-offs for accounts are doing and our loan defaults actually increasing, because that's not necessarily a good signal of a strong economy. And so even though the banks did beat their earnings because, of higher interest rates would kind of help them, at the same time, we're seeing that individuals are getting charge-offs and they're not being able to pay off their loan balances and they're defaulting. And so, this is kind of giving us a bad outlook going forward. And in fact, we heard the CFO for Wells Fargo say that overall the losses are still quite small. However, we do expect that there'll be more weakness in the market, and it's going to take a while to play out. And so what we're currently seeing is kind of this mixture of the overall picture of the overall economy, where we're having good signals, but we're also getting bad signals. Now, I went ahead and clarified my overarching view for the current state of the economy and going forward with the Push and Profit private group. But, in this video, I really just want to go ahead and talk about Tesla, and particularly what happened today and what are some things that we are going to see moving forward. Now, before we go ahead and talk about Tesla, I want to highlight these trade ideas I called out to the Push and Profit private group this morning. For example, I mentioned that I will be looking at getting 91 strike puts on Disney once we are greater than $91.05. And this ended up being a phenomenal trade, as pretty much Disney hit our entry and pretty much fell down for the entirety of the day. But the other trade idea I highlighted was that I was going to be watching Microsoft and looking for 342 calls once we are below $348.45. And when we take a look into Microsoft, we had an amazing entry with a trade that did over 200% if you traded the options. However, it was a scalp trade, and if you looked past that later on into the day, we ended up seeing Microsoft also kind of cool off and fall down. And so with that said, if you guys want access to my daily briefings and my daily trade ideas, make sure to check out the first link in the description below so you guys can have access to the Push and Profit private group. But let's go ahead and talk about Tesla now. Alrighty, so we're officially in my laptop, and we're gonna go ahead and now finally cover Tesla. Now, so far in the video, I mentioned a couple of things, right? We talked about the bank earnings, we talked about consumer sentiment, we talked about alternative data, we talked about a couple of things. Now, I know some individuals may watch this and they may say, well, what's the point of, talking about all this? I just want to know what's going on with Tesla? Well, one of the things I try to stress on the channel is that you want to look at several different data points, right? You want to have a holistic approach to the market. You don't want to just look at the chart for Tesla or any just one singular data point and try to make a hypothesis of what's going on. It's important to look at the alternative data, like I showed you guys earlier about, the search volume, because that is a telling story, right? It's important to know how the banks are doing in their earnings, because they in a sense have a pulse on the market, right? And so they could kind of give us an indication of what's going on. But it's also important to pay attention to the consumer sentiment, because we want to know what Americans are looking into or what they think is going on in the overall economy, right? And so this is why it's really important to look into all that. And so we're getting a lot of good data, although there is some mixture in the data, right? Everything looks good so far in the short term, but in the long term, things kind of look a little bit iffy, right? We remember in a previous video just 2 days ago, I talked about the CPI report. We saw that inflation's cooling off. I talked about the PPI report. We're seeing that producer prices are also cooling off, which is kind of like the future indicator for how the inflation for the CPI is looking, right? And so we're seeing a lot of good economic signs. However, at the same time, we're also seeing some bad economic signs going forward. And so with that said, here's my thoughts on Tesla, right? Obviously, I don't have a crystal ball, and anyone who tells you that they have a crystal ball, you should run away from them as soon as possible. But what I think is going to most likely happen, and this is just my thoughts, you guys could comment in the comment section below your opinions as well, but I have a strong belief that Tesla is going to perform well for their earnings. Now, am I 100% positive on that? No, right? And the reason being is because, okay, yeah, they did great delivery numbers, but as I reiterated in several videos, they had to reduce their price. But we see that because they reduced their price, we have a lot of people looking into Tesla. And so there's a high possibility that Tesla is, going to be able to beat its earnings. And that could possibly move us an additional 6 or 8%. Now, remember when Tesla beat its delivery numbers, we had this gap over here, right? And, this was a pretty strong gap. And then, afterwards I said, hey, we're most likely going to come down and fill that gap. And I talked about other underlying reasons why. But here we are today, right? Here we are at this level at around $280, right? Now, if Tesla has a good earnings, that's the main catalyst event, right? The main picture for Tesla is understanding the fundamentals, which is coming in just a few days. If Tesla does beat their earnings, we could see a massive push up. Now, the reason why I say a massive push up is not just for the sake of wanting to use that, specific word, but simply because when we look at the volume relative to price right over here on the volume profile, we see that we're in an area where there's very little volume relative to price. I know I say this very often in my videos, but it's important to pay attention to this. When there's little volume to price, any movement, whether it's going up or going down, is going to be amplified. Why? Because there's not too much of a battle between the bid and the ask, and so if there's a lot of buying pressure, it's going to push up the order books. And I want to go ahead and show you guys an example of this from a smaller time frame. So this is a 5-minute time frame for today for Tesla, right? So this is just for today, right? And I want you guys to pay attention to the volume profile for the 5 minutes trading session, right? So we see that when there's a lot of volume, right? This is the highest area of volume relative to price. That's where we see the most consolidation. That's where we start to see supports and resistances form. For example, over here, when we were at this area where there's a lot of volume by price, we kind of see that there's an area of resistance and consolidation. We kind of go up, we go down, we go up, right? And then as we start going down, where there's less volume relative to price, it's bigger moves down, right? And then we see the same thing over here towards the end of the day. A lot of consolidation. We kind of have this little support set up. But notice how this area right over here, where there's very little volume to price, there's the biggest moves for the day. We see these big candles going up. Why? Because there's buying pressure and there's not a lot of battle between the bid and the ask. And so that pushes the order book up. And it's the same thing going down. If the trend is going downwards and there's little volume relative to price, we see the price action push downwards very hard and very fast. And so I wanted to show you guys this demonstration with a 5-minute candle for today's trading session and bring it back to the weekly time frame to kind of show you where exactly we're at. we're at this area where, hey, if we have good earnings, it pushes us to this area where there's very little volume to price, and we could possibly see Tesla go back up, to the, mid 300 levels, and even possibly to 370, right? Now, again, we also have to look at the bear side, right? Because again, like I said earlier, I don't have a crystal ball. And so we're going to want to really be very agile and move accordingly to the fundamentals. Now, one of the advantages that retail has, although I know it may seem like, all the hedge funds and all the politicians and the congressmen, that, they all have these advantages, whether it's Nancy Pelosi, like in yesterday's video, I talked about having insider trading and being one of the best traders out there, or it's hedge funds who have, an absorbent amount of money to really just put out there for research and being able to get more data, right? They oftentimes smart money has more advantages, but there's one advantage that people like you and I have, right? The small retail traders have this advantage of being able to get in and out, right? Because most of us, right, who are trading, we're not trading with billions of dollars. I don't think anyone is watching my video and they have billions of dollars. If you are, then I mean, that congratulations, that's good news for you. But most likely, most individuals who are watching my video aren't moving with that much capital. And so, even if you're trading with $3 million, right, which is still a lot of money, it's still enough where you could get in and out, right? And so the reason I say this is because, we want to be able to be agile, as I say. And so, if Tesla moves upwards, it's going to take a long time for these institutional buyers to really kind of pile into Tesla, right? One of the things I showed in the previous video is that Tesla has a small, ownership from institutional investors relative to other mega cap stocks. It has a lot of ownership with retail, right? And so that means that institutional investors still haven't really piled too much money into Tesla. And if we have a good earnings, well, it's still going to take time for them to kind of buy in and build their position versus us. We could kind of go in and out relatively very quickly. And so this also gives us the advantage for the downside, right? So if Tesla starts falling down because of a bad earnings, one of the things I mentioned in the previous video, and I know I keep saying, in the previous video, this is why it's beneficial for you to subscribe to the channel. If you find any utility or any value, of course, I'm not begging you guys. It's only if you guys see value in it. But, it's because I mentioned a lot of things in previous videos, and I hate to repeat it all the time because it'd be kind of redundant. But one of the things I mentioned previously is that there's this area right over here where we see a lot of volume relative to price, and we see that's where we kind of find these areas of supports and areas of resistances. And so one of the things I highlighted is that, hey, in the bear case, if Tesla doesn't beat its earnings, I could see Tesla falling down, and we're going to want to pay attention to this area right over here because we most likely may see Tesla hold up over here. Is it guaranteed? Absolutely not. Technical analysis is a good, it's a data point, but it's not the strongest data point out there, right? And stocks don't have to adhere to whatever happens on the charts, right? No matter if you draw your little trend line or squiggly lines, I always say this, the stock market doesn't have to adhere to whatever you draw on the chart. But it's going to be very important to see what happens when Tesla reaches this area, because if this ends up being an area of support, well, this could be an opportunity to buy in, right? We're going to want to see if Tesla falls down. Is it going to, break below it? Or is it going to touch this area and then bounce up, right? Or is it going to touch it and consolidate and then eventually fall down or up? This is what we want to pay attention to. So from the perspective of a long-term investor, right, I don't really have any crazy moves that I'm planning to do, right? If Tesla ends up going down and finding support after having a bad earnings and starts showing confirmation of an uptrend, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to add more to my position, right? That's, what I'm doing because I'm optimistic and bullish on Tesla in the long term. Now, if Tesla goes up, I probably won't buy into Tesla as it goes up, simply because I like to only buy when there's, discounts in the market. That Warren Buffett quote that's very famous that I often say almost in every video is that, be fearful when everyone's greedy. So if Tesla's going up, you don't want to really buy in. Of course, if you're dollar cost averaging equally every month, then, go ahead and do that, right? But, I like to buy when everyone's fearful, right? Because that's when you want to be greedy, sticking to the Warren Buffett quote. And so one of the things I finally was able, by the way, to add more shares into Tesla just recently, because one of the things I've been struggling with this year for my long-term portfolio with Tesla is being able to have an opportunity to buy more, because Tesla kind of rallied up the whole entire year. And yeah, we did dip over here, But I honestly, I don't have unlimited capital, right? I wish I did, but I honestly just couldn't buy in more for Tesla in my long-term portfolio right over here because I already put the capital into other index funds that I was looking to buy, right? And so, nothing fancy is happening over here with my long-term portfolio. If Tesla falls down, great, it's a buying opportunity. If Tesla goes up, even better because, obviously I'm benefiting from having ownership of Tesla in my long-term portfolio. Now, from a short-term trading account, one of the things I've said is that, hey, if Tesla falls down, I'm still very skeptical of shorting simply because Tesla has a lot of catalyst events lined up, and, it's just not so in my view, it's just not really a good idea to short Tesla, especially considering the fact that Tesla is one of the most shorted mega caps out there. Now, you can do it, you personally, right? But I don't intend on doing it. Even if we have a major fall down over here, I rather much would short something else in my short-term trading account than short Tesla, right? Again, one of the things I always say in my videos is that you guys should always just trade and invest in whatever you see value in, and you should never just copy me, right? Because I could be wrong, right? And although I've been calling things out very correctly for the last few months, there's going to be times where I'm wrong, and so you guys have to, see value in whatever you see value in, or that sounds redundant, but you guys should only trade and invest in whatever you guys see value in. For example, a good example of this was a time, it was around over here on the 7th, where I said most likely Tesla's going to fall down, right? But I said I still wouldn't short Tesla even in my short-term trading account. Now, when Tesla the next day fell down, it was an opportunity for individuals to short, even though I didn't short. So you guys don't have to copy me. If you guys see value in shorting in the short term, then by all means, you can do it. I mentioned, hey, it's most likely Tesla's going to fall down, but I still don't plan on shorting. You could have, done your own due diligence and said, okay, well, it makes sense that Tesla's probably going to fall this day, and you could have shorted and made a profit. At the end of the day, it's all up to you and whatever strategy you find reasonable, right? Now, I do want to answer a question that I got a comment on in my last video. Someone asked, how can I be, trading Tesla in the short term if I have Tesla in my long-term portfolio? So to answer this question very simply, right, I have two separate accounts, right? I have a long-term investing account, right, with one brokerage, and then I have a short-term trading account with another brokerage, right? And I separate the two because trading and investing are two separate vehicles. So, anything I do in my short-term trading account, that's just, just active income, just kind of trading in the short term. It has nothing to do with my long-term portfolio. And I know that may confuse individuals because usually when you have someone talking about the stock market, it's either from one side, investing long-term or trading short term. I do both. I think there's benefits in doing both, and I am a long term investor, and I do have holdings in index funds and some individual stocks like Tesla, but I also trade in the short term. But again, just wanted to answer that real quickly. I don't want to make this video any much more longer than it needs to. And so with that being said, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys on this next video right over here. Take care, guys.